Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Criminal investigators say there's evidence the missile launcher, which destroyed flight MH17 2 years ago over eastern Ukraine, did come from Russia. 298 people died. Moscow has always disputed claims it was fired by Russian-backed rebels. Here's our transport correspondent, Richard Westcott.
Caught in the crossfire of someone else's war, in busy skies that were meant to be safe. Nearly 300 people were on flight MH17, 80 of them children. It was brought down by a Russian-built Buk missile. Both sides in the war have them. Now criminal investigators say they're closing in on those responsible.
On the 17th of July, flight MH17 was shot down by a Buk missile fired from farmland in Pervomaisky, and the system was brought in from the Russian Federation territory and then returned to the Russian Federation afterwards.
This recreation from investigators suggests the missile launcher crossed over the Russian border on the morning MH17 was shot down. Here's a tapped mobile phone call from 9:22 a.m. An officer tells his commander it crossed the line. Now, the line he's talking about is the Russian border. There's no attempt to hide the launcher, which is sat on the back of a Volvo truck. Lots of people took pictures and films. They put them on social media. Here, it's parked up in a lay-by in the city of Donetsk. The final destination was a farmer's field near the town of Pervomaisky, which was controlled by Russian-backed separatists. Now, firing left these scorch marks on the ground, and locals took pictures of the smoke trail. It's then filmed heading back to Russia. Crucially, one of its missiles is now missing. Moscow has always fought claims it's involved.
We've been ruling out, and I've been ruling out, the fact that any Russian weapons were shipped to Ukraine, any Russian army members, any Russian troops were inside Ukraine, and we're still ruling out that possibility.
Bryce Fredericks and his girlfriend Daisy were on board MH17, heading for a dream holiday in Bali.
It's a big step towards the truth, a big step. We're not there yet. Of course, we want to know exactly who, names and why, especially why.
Investigators say they're down to 100 suspects for who fired the missile. Even if they do eventually name names, it's by no means certain that whoever did this will face a court of law. Richard Westcott, BBC News.
It was Russia that transported the missile that hit flight MH17 over eastern Ukraine, international criminal prosecutors said today. The Dutch-led joint investigation team said there was conclusive evidence that a BUK missile hit the Malaysian Airlines plane in 2014, and that it was fired from a village under the control of pro-Russian rebels. All 298 people on board the Boeing 777 died when it broke apart in midair, flying from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur. Russia immediately denies responsibility. Our correspondent Jonathan Miller has this.
A block of rough-hewn stone with a plaque in Cyrillic stands in bleak farmland in rebel-held eastern Ukraine. In memory of 298 people who died. Halt and pray, it reads. Here, a Boeing fell. Nothing beside remains. Bodies and baggage and wreckage were scattered over 50 square kilometres when the Malaysian 777-200, en route from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur, disintegrated at 33,000 feet at 3 seconds and 20 minutes past 1 in the afternoon of the 17th of July 2014. The Boeing fell into fields of sunflowers on the battlefield below. The answers as to the how, who and why have been fought over ever since. Now we know the how for sure.
We have no doubt about the correctness of the conclusions that we present today. And the conclusion is that on the 17th of July 2014, flight MH17 was brought down with a Buk rocket that was launched from farmland at Pervomaisk, and that the missile system arrived from the Russian Federation and was returned there afterwards.
The conclusion, in other words, confirms what's been alleged all along, that a Russian-made surface-to-air missile system brought down the plane. For 2 years, the Dutch-led joint investigation team pored over evidence in meticulous detail. Forensic evidence from satellite images, radar data, mobile phone intercepts, photographs, autopsies and witness testimonies. They ruled out all other scenarios. This was irrefutable, the investigators said.
Heeft een foto gestaan van het konvooi in Donetsk.
They presented videos of the missile system entering the Russian-backed separatist region east of Donetsk. 4 Buk missiles on board. Then there was film of the low-loader leaving, heading back into Russia later the same day, with only 3 missiles.
Dat nu slechts 3 raketten op de installatie liggen.
The journey reconstructed with computer graphics.
De Buk-telaar is vermoedelijk zelfstandig.
Here, triangulated evidence from photographs of smoke trails taken by 2 different witnesses, pointing to this charred corner of a field, the launch site. They translated and transcribed mobile phone intercepts, in which rebel fighters give the convoy directions. In the Netherlands today, the report brought a measure of closure for families.
Up till now there were a lot of speculations, but I see this as something really, a big relief for me.
If a missile is sent from Russia to the Ukraine for just 1 day, then there must have been a decision, and the decision is definitely cannot be taken by just a soldier.
Today, Russia fired back, unleashing a barrage of denials.
The shrapnel damage
The international channel Russia Today, widely seen as pro-Kremlin, citing doubts about most of the findings. The Kremlin insisting Ukraine is to blame. Ukraine's on the investigation team, the Russian Defense Ministry said. How can you trust them? The manufacturer of Buk missiles said a Buk had indeed brought the plane down, but that the aging missile was obsolete. The warhead no longer in Russia's arsenal. Today's report does not name suspects, but the investigators are now looking into who gave the order to fire and who ordered the missile deployed. The same sort of questions, in fact, being asked of Russia right now over its role in Syria. Some might say a pattern's emerging.
Jonathan Miller reporting. We're joined now by the author and Washington Post columnist Anne Applebaum and Dutch MEP Marietje Schaake, who sits on the Foreign Affairs Committee at the European Parliament. Marietje Schaake, what happens now? We obviously need the final report, but are there grounds for a prosecution of some sort, or is it simply going to be a blame game and that's where it stops?
Well, I think first and foremost, we must establish that this is very important information for the loved ones of the victims and the result of very thorough investigations that have produced clear results. And the investigation has always consisted of 2 parts. 1, the details of what happened, which were presented today, and 2, who is responsible. And I think the report that was presented today puts an end to a number of conspiracies that have been coming from Russia, and it is now high time that the Russian authorities cooperate to make sure that those who are responsible are brought to justice.
Well, how can you bring them to justice? I mean, you know, this is also going on in Syria, a Russian involvement, and there's no prospect, it seems, that they can be brought to justice in either theatre.
Well, at least we must do everything we can to make sure that an independent investigation looks at who are responsible and that the Russians at least cooperate to make sure that they are credible when they say they are willing to cooperate and to end the wild conspiracies that have been coming out of Russia about this terrible, terrible attack on MH17, which killed 300 innocent people. So I also think that this is an appeal to the Kremlin and everyone who is responsible for playing with fire, whether it's the bombardments in Syria or whether it has been around eastern Ukraine. It is very important that the Russian authorities change course, and they can still do this. And I'm very much focused on the results of the report of MH17 today, and I hope that this will be a wake-up call for those responsible in Russia.
So, a change of course from the Russians, and yet if you look at what Dmitry Peskov, the spokesman for Mr. Putin, says, nothing to accept or deny. We cannot accept as final truth of what they say. I bet you haven't seen any proof of what they say.
Right. Well, this, of course, has been the Russian line from the very beginning. Within hours of the crash, they put out dozens of different theories, some absurd, some crazy, about why the plane crashed. And their point from the very beginning has been to confuse the waters so much that no investigation would be able to convince everybody. In a way, they've been seeding the conspiracy theories in order to create this atmosphere of hysteria and sort of post-fact reality around the case. I think, unfortunately, expecting them to stop now is pretty unrealistic. They're very invested in this, in denying this, and they're very invested in really dealing with the outside world in this kind of way. This is now how they respond, as you rightly alluded in your report to Syria. This is how they now respond to all allegations. We don't answer, we don't look at facts, we're not interested in the truth. We just offer you a dozen conspiracy theories instead.
But you have the Russians in play in these two theatres, and you wonder, is this the new world order? I mean, are you actually going to have a major power simply acting through subsidiaries and rocking world security?
Yes, I mean, I think that is what we have, and I think it's time that we began to face up to the implications of it. This is not a power that is acting in a way to increase stability. This is not a power that is responsible. This is not a power that wants to end wars. It's not going to they're not trying to end the war in Syria.
But does the West have any actual power to bring them to justice?
To bring the Russians to justice? No, the West doesn't have power to bring Russians to justice, but it's very important that the West continue to state the truth and continue to conduct reliable investigations so that at least the floor under the conspiracy theories is not so solid.
Shaka, Mr. Shaka, the best thing surely that could be done is to muscle in the whole of Europe when it comes to getting the Russians to do something about this. Do you think that the European family of 27 nations is capable of standing up to the Russians and demanding that something is done about this?
Well, I believe we must, and I do believe that today's report, once again, as well as Russia's role in Syria, should really lead to more leadership from the EU and from all 27. But the problem is precisely here that there are also governments and movements in our own member states that are being influenced by the conspiracies coming from Russia. And I think that this is a very dangerous development that we should be much more aware of and we should push back against, because it is not only having very bad impact in the Middle East or in eastern Ukraine, but also in our own societies. And, you know, we have seen, as Ms. Appelbaum also said, a number of incidents, conspiracies, messages coming out. And it is time that those who were not aware or those who thought that this would go away are actually going to be more engaged. But, you know, to be honest, the kind of leadership and unity and ambition to be a global player is not present enough in today's European Union.
Thank you, Marietta Schaake, thank you very, very much for talking to us from the European Parliament, and Anna, thank you very much too.